Steve Smith, for the record. My role this evening is to talk a little more specific about how this is going to apply to given parcels. We've talked in generalities, but you all have property of different types, sizes, shapes, and different plans for the future for that property, and it's going to impact it. The theme of the plan really is rural areas should remain rural, and new development will be focused in designated communities. We've said that. This plan really talks about how, to a little extent, how rural land might be used, but it talks to a great extent how neither area will be used for a lot because of all the restrictions. The restrictions apply across the board. The only plan is in the rural area, but that plan is very limited to really residential construction, but very limited residential construction. Again, rural areas remain rural, which means it's going to stay the same. In almost 90% of the cases, what you've got now is what you're going to have. The idea is that open field out there, if it's an open field now, it's going to be an open field for 20 years for the duration of the plan. That's what the plan is designed to do. So these restrictions that they're putting on here are designed to meet that goal. It's not designed to allow you to use your land. It's designed to allow you not to use your land. That is the goal. When we talk about it in a big vision for the county, it's hard to realize what it means for individual parcels. But if you think about these statements as it applies to a small piece of land, vulnerable land shall not be disturbed. We saw an overhead that showed big sections of vulnerable land, but vulnerable land is everywhere. Rural land shall not be subdivided. There's some exceptions, but shall not be subdivided, it says in there. Urban property to meet the demand for housing. The houses go in the urban area, though, again, there's no plan for where and how to put those houses in the urban area. Let me just go through a quick list from the ordinance or from the plan of the items to be protected. And think about this as you look at that rural land to be protected. Good farmland, forest land, mineral deposits, lakes, groundwater, surface water, 15% sloped areas or steeper, riparian buffers, which means probably 100 foot or so on both sides of any creeks, channels, ditches, swales, areas without appropriate soil. I'll talk about that more in a minute. Scenic rural roads to preserve, floodplains, and karst-prone areas. So when you apply those to any given piece of land, most pieces of land don't stand the test. Most fall along the way somewhere, or at least most of the land on a particular parcel falls along the way. And then it's all limited by infrastructure. If there's not infrastructure there, and we don't know yet exactly what the standard of infrastructure will be, but if there's not infrastructure, even if you pass all these other tests, then you still can't do anything with it. So again, the plan is designed not to do anything in those rural areas. Let me look at a couple of examples. If you could forward one, or can I forward on this?
I think
There's
you
one.
can.
Okay. Okay. This is an existing house on the north side. I didn't have to go very far. This is in Marlin Hills. And I've shown the 15% slope line on the drawing, or on the exhibit. So you see a cul-de-sac, a house, and the 15% slope line I put on in dark. This is a walkout basement house. Again, I didn't have to go very far to find it. But at the front of the house, the land slope is steeper than 15% from that point back. That means a couple of things. One, this becomes a non-conforming use because it's no longer in compliance with the code. But also it means that if one were to try to develop Marlin Hills today, you probably couldn't do it because of the 15% slope. Now, I was looking for a way just to be sure we all understand what that 15% slope is, and I got my tape measure out a few minutes ago. You may have seen me. The platform is 18 inches off the floor. So if I go over 10 feet, 3, 6, 9, 10 feet from the floor to the platform is a 15% slope. Go out your backyard. I'll bet almost everybody in there has 15% slopes in their yard. 10 feet, 1.5 feet, that's all it is. And you can see why our standard walkout basement house that's built all over this county won't be built anymore because the land's too steep for a walkout basement house. Next slide is another house right across the street. Again, I didn't have to go very far. And right at the back of the house, the pool is over 15% slope. Walkout basement houses are a thing of the past. If you've got a lot There may be an exception for existing lots of record. There probably will be, but if it's got a little bit of flat spot, you're going to have to build on the flat. You can't build on the 15% slope. So the typical walkout basement house, it's so prevalent, won't be around anymore. Let's look at another example. Next slide. This one's a little bit busy. I apologize for that. But this is Hoosier Energy on the north side of town. And again, I didn't have to go very far. I was just looking north. Hoosier Energy has an office building. State Road 37 is up on the upper top of the picture. The office building is next. And once again, I've hatched the areas that are steeper than 15% slope. And the bottom of the drawing is their yard area and buildings. But the important thing from this is what I see is that almost all of their buildings would be considered to be over the 15% slope. All of their buildings. So now, they couldn't have built this if it didn't exist now. But more importantly, it becomes a non-conforming use. It was legal at the time it was built, but now it's a non-conforming use. And let's look at the next slide to see the complications. Pre-existing non-conforming. And the code says right now, no legal pre-existing non-conforming use of land or structure may be enlarged, moved, or otherwise changed unless a variance is obtained. So Hoosier Energy and probably hundreds or maybe even thousands of other parcels in this county are going to become pre-existing non-conforming because the codes are changing so much that what we already built doesn't comply anymore. Now this may or may not apply to you. Maybe you have a house that's a walkout basement and you want to add to the house. You may not be able to do that. I had a client, and just like Aaron was saying, all my clients aren't building big subdivisions and apartment complexes and the like. We've got a lot of clients that have a parcel of land they want to split. And about a year ago, a little more than a year ago, a fellow came to me, had 50 acres, wanted to split it in 2 pieces. 50 acres, 2 pieces. He was in the Lake Monroe watershed that has an 18% slope requirement already. The house and the garage each had decks on the back that became non-conforming when they changed to 18% slope. So the decks were there, they were legal, but they extended out beyond what became the 18% slope. So they became legal non-conforming uses. Before he could split his 50 acres into 2 lots, he had to take one deck off completely, and he had to cut the back off the other deck so that they complied before he could split 50 acres into 2 parcels. And that's common, and it's not a big developer, it's just the guy off the street that wanted to split 50 acres in 2. So we're going to have a lot of nonconformity and a lot of problems because of the sweeping changes. 15% slope is not very steep. It's a sweeping change. Next slide. Again, the slide isn't very clear. The slide itself isn't what's important. What's important is this is a subdivision that was developed a few years ago in Monroe County. It's 52 acres, and it had 13 lots. It's out in the country, 4 acres per lot. Perfectly legal, fine subdivision. Everybody's happy. Homes are starting to be built. I apply the 15% slope line. That's the dark lines. And again, the numbers are what's important. I lose 3 lots. So the 13 lots goes to 10 lots because of the slope. I really don't know how to evaluate the forest, the farmland, or the forest, the habitat, and the endangered species. I don't know how to evaluate that, so I didn't do that. But the next thing in the code says, locate subdivisions containing 5 or more lots in the designated growth areas. 5 or more lots in the, that means that this would be limited to 4 lots. And my 13 lots is 4 lots. There's another overlapping provision that says, establish a minimum of 2 points of egress for subdivisions of 5 or more lots. This is accessed by 1 contact to the county road. So I've got overlapping criteria that require no more than 4 lots. 52 acres. The next thing that really got this one was soils. And the ordinance or the proposal says establish standards that require soils that are suitable to the permitted use. And this is kind of a hidden one. There's a soil report done for every county. I've got one here. Mine's pretty tattered. Every acre in the county has a soil classification, and it's all mapped out. It's all in the book, And Monroe counties are mostly severe soils. As a matter of fact, there are 65 soils listed in the book for Monroe County. 60 of them are rated severe for local road construction. 60 out of 65. More importantly, of those 5 soils that are okay, they comprise 1.5% of the acreage. So the other 98.5% of the acreage in the county would be ruled out by the requirement that the soil be suitable for its use. So this particular subdivision, of course, is all severe. So that takes my 4 lots down to 0, I guess. I'm not sure what I do when I have no land left that meets the criteria. And that's going to happen in the case of soils on almost every site in the county. So again, the plan really does stop rural activity. I was asked to talk a little bit about minor subdivision also. Again, specifics. I've been in dialogue with the county for about 2 months now, trying to understand it, and I don't really understand it yet, but I'll explain it as best I know based on my conversations and study of the code. First thing is that all these requirements will apply. Whatever acreage you've got, it may just be eliminated because of all these overlaying requirements. But assuming you have some land left, if you have 8 or more acres in a rural area, you may be able to split it into 2 pieces. May. If you've got 17 or more acres in what's a forest area, you might be able to split it into 2 pieces. Then, if you've got a larger parcel, there's going to be a density allocated for every square mile in the county. That's not been done yet. And once that's done, if in your square mile there is some density left, you might be able to subdivide additionally, if there's any density left. Those, like I say, haven't been assigned yet. In any case, we're going to be limited by those 4 lots because anything more than 4 lots has to be in the urban area. So that means you could have 40 acres, 80 acres, 160 acres, and the maximum is 4 lots if you're in a rural area. And you got to go back one more slide.
Cool.
So we started. The point of my few comments here is to say what's in the proposed plan supports this concept. It supports it through and through. You put the overlapping requirements onto a piece of parcel, wherever that parcel is, and chances are you'll be able to do almost nothing with it. They did when they drafted the lake watershed overlay constraint zone about 15 years ago, put a provision in that you could always build 1 house. You could violate the ordinance so you could build 1 house. And I suspect that's what will happen. That 50-acre subdivision site probably would be allowed to have 1 house. Because if you took everything away, then you'd be a taking by the county. They'd have to pay for it. So probably most parcels will be eligible for 1 house. At most, in the rural areas, 4 houses. So again, that's how, when you look at all these requirements, they filter out on specific sites.